Okay.
All set.
Oh, now I see. It sent me over to YouTube.
Oh, yeah. Now it just popped up
We're
on
live?
Facebook. We
Really?
are live. So here we are. Let me make sure my phone is muted.
Man, good morning, all whoever's out there.
Good morning.
On quiet phone here. Try this again. It's a
All
terrible idea to have me in charge of the restream thingy.
Thingy.
We are with 4 minutes to spare.
Plenty of time. Plenty of time. I am going to X out of the rest of this. Hopefully our internet will cooperate a little bit better this week.
Well, I got a dongle, as we say in the industry, this week, and I plugged into, hardwired into the interweb. So,
There you go.
nothing could go wrong.
You are set. Okay, good. Well, I hope Robin will let us know if we're having any sort of major technical difficulties. But so far, you two look great.
As do you.
Well, we'll get started at about 9 o'clock. So we've got a couple of minutes to continue our conversation from last week on COVID and the Incarnation. It was great. We got a few questions in afterwards, but it was just really nice to be able to hear everybody's own kind of reflections as they went along. And one of, part of what we'll eventually probably talk about in here is what we've done within our ministries. We talked a lot about liturgy last week, but within our ministries to be able to, continue to have classes and discussions through an imperfect medium like Zoom, to be able to kind of keep up some of our relationships with each other. But this was another way of doing that, and it was great to have a piece of that conversation back that, I don't know, I probably just didn't realize how much I took for granted in the life of the church before now.
Yeah, that's got to be a takeaway from the year if we're paying any kind of attention, right? Just naming what we missed, what we scrambled to replace with something else. And
funny.
In our own lives.
Yeah. I got into the Episcopal Church in college, and so I was sort of used to having this community of people who were engaging with hard questions around me, thoughtfully. At the time, just at the time of my life, but now again, kind of relearning that was one piece of what really meant something to me in finding people.
Yeah. Oops. Can you hear those dings? Are those broadcast to everyone in the world?
Everyone knows that you are getting some notifications. In fact, we all know that it's a reminder that your forum is starting at 9 a.m.
Yes. It's actually telling me that I'm off tomorrow. That too. So, all right. How do I turn those off, actually?
Another exciting COVID change here.
We need checklists like pilots, right? To go right down.
It'd be great if it was just a lever that you flipped, though, too, that was like turn off all the sounds.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to navigate through the menu bar.
Do not disturb. Where do I find do not disturb on my laptop?
Top right corner. I'm gonna trust her when she's
across the room here. We have an elaborate system of signals like a third base coach that she can deploy at any time to stop me. Okay. Today down to the circle. Oh yeah, down there at the bottom. That is very inconspicuous. In my defense, that's very inconspicuous.
Agreed.
Really.
I'm following
Okay,
along
do
here.
not-
Tough.
Do not disturb. I'm asking not to be disturbed.
Mhm. While you're working on that, we just got a message from Zeta Gates, one of our most faithful daily office participants, that asking for prayers for Peanut, her dog, who vomited all night, seems to be alert and okay right now. And that was a reminder to me that
Oh.
one of the things I've heard from so many people is how comforting their pets have been to them
Oh,
during this
yeah.
time, and how that's been a big part of what's gotten them through this. And so we will say prayers for Peanut
We will.
and for Zeta.
Yeah, I don't. I was thinking this morning on this and about like how my particular life has changed, and I'm pretty sure I did not have such a, I don't know, comprehensive running conversation with my dogs before now. I think it was just a kind of a normal like human dog interaction, and now, you know, I'm telling him what I'm doing and and how cute he is at all times, and yep, like my little
Here, here.
Wilson, like a little Wilson volleyball.
Yeah, we all need our Wilsons. I think I've instructed my computer not to disturb me, so
Okay,
no
great.
promises.
Well, then we can go ahead and dive in. If you're just joining us, you have stumbled upon, by some movement of the internet gods, to the conversation between the three clergy of Calvary Episcopal Church here in downtown Memphis. We are continuing our conversation about COVID and the Incarnation, how some pieces of our theology have actually worked in helping us to navigate this time, have been important as we've made certain decisions. We talked a lot last week about, you know, some of what that meant liturgically, but also on a larger scale of what this has meant for Calvary as a whole, and what we've emphasized, and the things that we've held on to while other things have had to go away. That's been an important piece of this too, because there are certain things that the church, while we've let go of in-person meetings, there were certain pieces of this that we did hold as a priority. And I'm thinking particularly of what's now fondly known as basement church, and the way that ministry to the poor of downtown Memphis couldn't be done. Like, this isn't a thing that can be done virtually. It says something to me about the way the pandemic has a sort of inequity in the way that it has rolled out in its effect on us, but also the way that the church has held to something greater than its own, I don't know, than the fear that is also out there and around us at all times too. I wondered if you guys wanted to talk about that at all. We didn't really mention it too much last week.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful instance of if we knew one way to do something, if we only knew one way to, only could conceive of one way to do something, then all that outreach ministry just had to halt
Right
when the world needed it most. But people within it who realize that, you know, ultimately our goals have to be broader. Our goals have to be meeting people where they are and then figuring out how to do that, you know, and it was done beautifully for years downstairs in the mural room, in a particular way. But yeah, the way that so many people's creativity contributed to that, what the two groups are now kind of calling basement church, which combines both the community breakfast and the closed closet, and it's outside. It's actually become a community of prayer that the people who were the volunteers, which have both expanded. It includes people who didn't do that before. But it's the way it started, of course, is like these. Hilario paints these stars, gold stars, up and down the alley 6 feet apart, because everything has to go into the alley and we have to keep people as safe as we can. And breakfast changed, it went outside, and the closed closet eventually went completely outside as far as the volunteers themselves as well. So now there are tables, it takes more setup, but it's just like it's as close to to an outdoor party as we can get right now.
True. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it looks like an outdoor shopping bazaar that you might see in another country. It has that feel, and lots of new volunteers who are engaged in it now. And I was thinking about one part of Incarnation is thinking about this inner outer uh, dichotomy, and how I think our community breakfast before, so many people did not see it unless you were directly involved in it because it took place in the mural room and from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, when people pass by or when people are walking by, they can see this, or if people are arriving early for church or choir practice, they can see our parking lot is vibrant. And one great thing about it too is I'm noticing our volunteers and we as a clergy team who've participated some are getting to know our neighbors better. I know that Scott and I were helping a gentleman the other day, and Scott knew him by name just from seeing him at Basement Church, seeing him outdoors. And it, I think I see people making deeper connections through what we're doing now, and it feels like a greater mutuality in what's going on.
We've actually heard that back. Christine's heard that back from guests at Basement Church, that they've said, we loved it before, we loved it now, but we're actually getting to know y'all better because people are walking around taking their orders for clothing and whatnot, and there's just more opportunity. Everybody's not packed into that room at the table.
That's part of it too. The claustrophobia of the basement is a real physical a reminder of the physicality of the ministry that we do, right? That part of what we've gained in this is a sort of way to open that up in what we do too. Yeah. So I guess that kind of talks about that for me kind of opens up the question that rolls around in my head about the pandemic, and I know it does in all y'all's as well. It is what it means to be the church, and what the church's place is in this time of great fear, of great personal danger and risk, for interpersonal exchanges. What's the church's place in this, in a pandemic that it really does adversely affect those who are already behind, right? And we don't see this just with the homeless community, but within there's a lot of conversation around it with educators, students who didn't have access already to the things, to not only, but the internet, but like a family that can hire someone to come in and help, or have a group of a pod of children that they can look over, families that aren't able to take off from work, and most families, if the two-parent household, that both of them are working, and there's not an option to have someone take off from that. And what we're seeing, of course, is that women are what the job numbers that came out, was it last week, that 100% of the losses of a kind of a staggering amount of job loss, 100% of it was women. Was that right? Did you see that?
I didn't see that. Wow.
It was like 100 and some thousand jobs that were lost.
Wow.
And of course, and within that, what's disproportionate within those number of women are that this loss is reflective among people of color in particular too. So we've seen this sort of thing happening as well, that the divides are getting deeper. Jeff Bezos makes $6 billion in a day because of the increased business through Amazon, and meanwhile, the people who were just struggling to get by, there's no longer an option. So I wondered if we could reflect on that a little bit, who we are as the church and our place in it.
Absolutely. Paul, you go.
Well, yeah, one of the things that struck me early on in the pandemic were seeing the long lines of cars, on Union. At first, I'm used to seeing them around Chick-fil-A, but seeing them at Idlewild and figuring out what this is. It's a line of cars were people waiting for food. And it reminded me, well, this must have been what the bread lines were like in the Great Depression. And these people are probably what we would call or label the working poor. At least they do have an automobile, but you could tell and it was a diverse grouping of people, and this was their source of food. And you've seen folks who are willing to talk on the news saying this food makes the difference to us. Unemployment has been, as Amber was just saying, is a reality. Less hours, people being able to work, local businesses, where we talked a little bit about the future of that last week. One person recently gave me a gift card to a local bookstore, and when I thanked her for it, she said, I've been very conscious about whatever gifts I'm doing, whatever purchases I'm making, I'm thinking local in everything I'm doing. And I think that's an incarnational tie-in too, is looking at how our growth of us economically as a community happens from within, and how we support that. And I think it is easy to go to Amazon and click the button, but I think it's making the more intentional decision to buy something from a local person who's anchored here, who's offering jobs here, who's part of this community, who's one of our neighbors, one of the sets of eyes that we need. I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's really economically, it's, by any biblical standard, truly biblical standard, our economy is broken.
Right.
Because going back through the prophets, if an economy continually delivers more and more to those up, it always has to be measured as to what it's doing for the most vulnerable, right? And this has really accentuated this divide. And the deep, troubling irony is that even as this is happening, we're identifying jobs as essential. People who can't be exempt from that, we're saying these are the jobs that people we can't be exempt from. And lots of those jobs are people making minimum wage or making definitely less than $15 an hour. They're stocking shelves. They're doing all of these services, which that's immoral. Like I'm not saying that I have a crystal ball and I can tell you how to reframe this economy, but where the prophet started was just the blunt truth that what's happening right now in our economic life is not of God.
Right.
And that should set us on a course to say, so what would be ways of responding? Because we've seen this for what it is all the time. I think the essential word is the one that really just hit me between the eyes. And there are people who you're describing, Amber, right? A lot of these people, that might be a single income household. It might be people living much more paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. So that's not hopeful, except that I do think truthfulness is where we have to start. Like, we have to see things for what they are. And my prayer is that we could, have some meaningful conversations as a community, as a nation, about what it means to work toward a more just economy.
Yeah.
What have we seen? There's this this Warren Buffett quote that I love, where he says, "When the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. It's only when the tide goes out that you see who's swimming naked." He was talking about investors when the market's on a everybody gets rich while it's run. When it comes down, you see who was prepared. Well, I feel like the whole country, all of us, the world was swimming naked. We're realizing that, we had these deep vulnerabilities. Can we pay attention to what we just learned and prepare ourselves a little more?
Yeah. And I think that's been a piece, one of the questions that we got in was, how personally we are dealing with the pandemic, just emotionally, spiritually, physically. And that's been one piece that's been really, the essentialness of certain jobs. And that's been really difficult for me to kind of square with, coming from a family full of people who are all labeled essential workers, to a sort of way that the conversation can happen with people with means in this, right? Who can say, well, of course you can't do this or that or this or that or that. And I don't see that same level of concern happening for my mom, right? And this sort of, she works at Walmart, and she's working more hours with more people than ever to keep up with the demand of business during that. I mean, their sales numbers were off the chart. And so that, of course, means that, that she's got more people around her more often than ever. And to feel some of that sort of tension in my soul, not just from my relative sense of safety and security, and but also in the sort of hyper vigilance towards cleanliness and sterility within human interaction that we have rightly I think as Calvary have said, okay, well, but we can't let this ministry go to the downtown poor, right? We can't, in the name of cleanliness, we're going to do everything we can to make this a real possibility and keep people safe and to follow the guidelines and to not, let go of science, but that there is a reality too that we want to be continuing to engage with and not to hole off into our own very privileged sort of bunkers, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which I've appreciated. And that's trickled out in not just our downtown ministry, but the idea that we, from the beginning, we're saying we're going to live stream from the church, right? To erase, and we felt very safe. We've had lots of people, medical teams, weighing in on how we do it and how to do this safely. But of course, we know that the only way to completely eradicate all risk is to stay away in your home at all times. And from the beginning, we've said, well, there's something else in the balance here. And that something to me says something about our incarnational approach.
Yeah, and there is risk embedded in incarnation, it occurs to me, as you use that term. And all of us as a community and as individuals have been trying to balance what risk and what responsibility, how that plays out in our own lives. And so there's not one answer. Mm-hmm. Except the one answer that there is that there is no way forward that doesn't involve risk.
Right.
And so that's another thing to be truthful about. Right. To honor the risks some people are taking on my behalf that I'm depending on day after day, but also then to have some way in community of talking about that and saying, this is how we mitigate everything we can. This is how we're see it as clearly as we can. But we're going to take this risk and this risk in this way. And these are our criteria, and these are the people we consulted because we matter to each other. And incarnation means that we physically need to be in relationship, meeting one another's needs. We can't seal ourselves off. To seal ourselves off from the virus completely is to seal ourselves off from one another, and we can't live that way.
Yeah.
So.
Right. From all of humanity. And
I think too, incarnation happens in a time and happens in a place. And I think it was very important to us early on as we were discerning this that you be able to see the altar at Calvary, and that we gather around that each Sunday, and that you be able to physically or to see it through your screen, see the altar, and have that connection with your home, your place. I think there's such a I know the church is not the building, but there is a strong identity with this particular historic building, the particularity of it, knowing that these walls have been infused with prayers for 185 plus years is just a powerful thing. And I think we've had some feedback that has been very important to you. And I think it's important to us. We offer that. It doesn't entail some risk. We tried to minimize that as much as we can, but it's been an important value moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And church is not the building. I mean, that's what I would, I think one thing that we've learned here is just how much buildings matter, how much the space matters, how much our ability to be embodied matters. And that, what C.S. Lewis's great line about to God, matter matters to God. That's why the incarnation happened. And now, like, we are not above that. We are not above God in our ability to sort of disembody ourselves from that place. And one of the things that really stuck out to me after our conversation last week was just how many people were just commenting on how good it was to see us as talking with each other. But of course, our talking with each other, the three of us, is something that's happened throughout this pandemic. Again, one of those things I sort of take for granted, that the conversations that we have with one another are so life-giving to me, and that you forget that it used to be kind of embedded within this place of community with other people too, and to just see people who enjoy chatting with each other about the things that they love can be a gift in its own way right now.
Yeah, it's access to others, to other lives, right? We need this access to other people's lives. Sometimes just the simple way to be drawn into conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we need access as in empathy for folks like your mom. Like, I need to realize that there are people out there that I could actually imagine myself into their situation. So all of this network of relationships we live within, how do we, and I totally agree about the physical stuff, the feel of the pews, the kneelers,
Jill's, what was Jill's line? Lumpy red cushion or something?
Jill's lumpy cushion, smells.
Yeah.
All of the senses are how we take in the world sacramentally, and just it's why sacraments matter. Yeah.
Speaking of for the children's ministry, we went and dropped off packs full of activities and supplies for the activities, and one of the great ideas that Gabby and Jess had, where it was to put these little vials of actual frankincense and myrrh in there as a sort of exploration of what exactly it was that the kings were bringing to Jesus. So a little candle to be able to have your incense going, and we didn't give them gold. We gave them Twix bars because they have the gold wrapper. But
that's fantastic. In a few weeks, I'm going to do a forum with my seminary prof, Roger Furlow, who wrote a book called Sensing God years ago that I love. It's just about the senses alive in Scripture, and how Scripture, one of the things he said, the pure nard that was anointed Jesus's feet, where he said that amount of nard would have just run everybody completely out of the house. It would have just been filled. It would have been, frankincense is pretty potent stuff too, So to have the senses all of a sudden engaged, maybe there are ways. How they say that how we know from our friends who are hearing or sight impaired, how the other senses come alive in ways that are powerful, and maybe there's something like that could also happen in us. What other senses could come more fully alive to compensate for the ways that we've been cut off? I think that's probably happening, even if we don't quite realize it yet.
Yes, agreed. One question that did come in that we would want to get to before going on was just how our theology of the Eucharist influenced the way we have or haven't offered it. So we talked a little bit about liturgically, Incarnation last week, and how that influenced the way that we've made decisions. But I wondered if we could chat about this, we kind of agreed in a way that really has, just because we will agree, maybe that's a good way to start this, that just because the three of us came to a pretty solid agreement about this immediately doesn't mean that it was that other people who we love and respect, maybe within this very town, would have made different choices about it that wouldn't be equally as grounded and with their own sort of understanding. So just to lay it out like that, maybe that differences in practice in Christianity are to be expected and valued and cherished in their own way, but we have more of a uniformity. And what did you say the other day? A uniformity in purpose, not in practice. I think that was your line, Scott.
Yeah, unity in purpose, but not uniformity in practice.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
I think we've had to find that, because there are some really clear things that I'm grateful for that are concrete in our tradition, our theological tradition and liturgical tradition about Eucharist. It does involve stuff, matter, material. Yes, there are ways that we believe God can be present to people who are physically cut off from the materials, but the practice has to be grounded in the materials. And part of our history too as Christians was, the Protestant side of our Anglicanism is going to say very clearly, priests do not do this on your behalf.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, God can expand the borders of the Eucharist beyond the chancel of Calvary. But when we had our conversations about, part of it was about what can we do by the prayer book, but part of it was like, what's signified? How will this be received? And will it feel like a select group are doing something on behalf of other folks who are cut off from it? Or early on we said, or is this a time to go back to the liturgies of the daily office and morning prayer that might be more that were beautifully created for a time like this, that involved both in the church and people in their homes. So those are hard. Yeah, they are harder conversations and decisions than one might think. But we landed on some important things. We wanted to be in the place. We wanted to be in the church if we could. We wanted to be at the same time. Part of being, we mentioned this last week, part of being embodied is to be in time as well, as much as space. And so if there's a sense, like right now, when I see flipping up through here that there's Rachel and Allison and Chuck and Betsy, and I do have a sense that something's happening in time. But Eucharistically, it really pushed us.
Yeah.
It really pushed us to decide, when does it feel like we've opened the door enough for enough of the community to be gathering to feel like we are a Eucharistic people celebrating Eucharist and making that available to people who don't feel safe to receive it again physically among us. And when do we need to say, no, if it feels like only a select few of us are going to get to receive this, we need to find the liturgy that speaks to these times. Really hard tension, but I've really been heartened that we've kind of been of one mind.
Yeah, I think.
Here.
Yeah.
And Paul, I rambled a long time, but
No, I was recalling too that when I think our first Eucharist that we did was outdoors at the Pocket Park.
Oh,
Yeah, and I think that what was so powerful about that some folks who so longing for the Eucharist teared up that day. It was really powerful. I think the absence of it, but I think there was an appreciation. I certainly had an appreciation for morning prayer. I think there's a richness there that we grew from during the time that we were offering that each Sunday. And then for a while we had the outdoor Eucharist at the Pocket Park, which I think was a real gift and showed another different way, a different flexible way of doing church. And and one of the things too that I thought about too, as Scott was talking about the senses, is how the mask, our eyes are revealed and maybe are more prominent when we're wearing masks. And it has been one of my own theology of the communion. I feel as much of the connection to Christ through meeting the eyes of other people at the altar or in the communion. And it's really been powerful. Through the mask has made that connection even stronger, that when we've experienced that. And I think it's not just in communion, but any contacts we make with people. It's something about that. The immanence of God and those relationships in the eyes have been really powerful.
That's interesting to hear. I've sort of had the opposite feeling about there's something about the masks that makes it hard for me to look at people in a way. Like it's almost like like a looking away from an inhuman sort of thing, which is not healthy and not good. And I'm not saying that this is right. Like I've just had an opposite sort of reaction to the mask. It's like, no, like look at, like there's still a person there, just because it's obscured.
those could be related too. because there is a sense in which we're asking so much of the eyes. There's so much information we need from the eyes as well, more than we would have perhaps, that it's a lot. And yeah, I do want the whole embodied person, but being bereft of other expression,
Yeah.
it may also intensify it and make it, there's more at stake.
Yeah.
Interesting
Could
thought,
be.
interesting reflections on that.
And I'll pick up on what Scott was saying too, with the, that we are Protestant enough to say that this was not happening on your behalf, that this was a product of the people, and that liturgy is the work of the people, that, we can't celebrate the Eucharist alone as priests, that it requires a community around us to say amen to these prayers for them to be valid. But also that that in a sense, we're also not so Protestant that we could say that this can be just something that you do as an individual memorial, right? That those were the two kind of ways of thinking about this as early on in Eucharistic theology, and still now. But that, was this the actual holy body and blood of Jesus Christ, or was it a memorial, right? Like Zwingli and those types. Was it just something you did to remember the story that happened, rather than an actual partaking of Christ's sacrifice? And so we also have, would say to you, if in case you wondered, that that because of that, because we are not memorialists, we do think that the very presence of Christ is in these gifts, and then it's not just something to. We hope you'll dwell on it personally. We hope that it would be a part of your practice to dwell on it personally, but that there's actually something physical happening here, that God has not just given us something to think about in our heads, but something to hold with our hands and take into our mouth and to taste, right? That God has honored materiality in that way as well. So when that wasn't possible, we wouldn't just tell you to take your bread and wine and do it yourself.
Jill has a comment here saying, "True confession, I mostly viewed Eucharist as a symbol until I couldn't receive it."
Ooh,
That really,
really
precisely, I think, gets at the struggle we were all trying to be faithful to. What you're talking about, Amber, the matter matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it also means that we can't fast forever.
Yeah.
That we are made to need this, we believe. There's something in us that's made to need Eucharist as Christian people. So that's kept us in, hopefully mostly a healthy tension as we, maybe it helps us frame and clarify and be pastoral and be in community all along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that that we haven't done or advertised as being able to do is the idea that we would come to your yard, right, and and bring you the Eucharist if that was something that you wanted. That is a way for me to keep the offerings of the table open when right now we can't. Why we can't in the building. So that is if you're all interested, we'll make a small logistical sort of map of how to do that. Oh, anything else on that, you guys? I think we've got about 5 minutes left here.
Oh, there's lots to be said, but one of the things that's struck me too, talked a little bit about it last week, is that we believe that we're being formed morally as Christians at the table and in community with one another and physically and embodied ways. that the moral life isn't just a decision up here about what's the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do. Most of the moral life doesn't come to us that way. And so I've found myself reflecting a lot on what it means to be shaped, or what, to be truthful about. I wonder what's withering a little bit in me that I need to exercise, because my moral life is all about these exchanges with other people and how I'm navigating relationships. What's happening to my soul? What am I missing? Because I truly believe that an essential part of that nourishment was receiving the sacrament week after week after week with these people who are also coming to the table, asking for God to return to us what we've offered to God in ways that shape us and change us and send us into the world, ready to live a little bit more fully out of the giftedness of our lives instead of the scarcity and necessity that seems to drive so much. And we need a community to do that. So that's another aspect that for me is tied to Eucharist a lot. But I'm just thinking, how am I being formed morally and ethically, so that my deep impulses toward the world are healing and life-giving and loving, and not damaging and fearful, and the other parts of myself that I know could easily come forth when I'm anxious.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, to think about, the sort of way that a disembodied spirituality, where, your body and spirit has been divided, right? That there's a sort of perishable, bad, earthly thing going on, and then there's a good, spiritual, ethereal thing that will last forever, rather than something that is knit together and totally inseparable. The way that can trickle out for me, or that I see, is there are real consequences for the world when you see the earth as an intrinsically bad and fallen and passing away thing, right? Or it's its own, like a way that this disembodiment in spirituality can have terrible effects, not just personally, but ecologically, like for the whole world. The way that our disconnection from a community can make us, what am I trying to say? Like sort of swept away by our own whims and okay, so here's what I'm thinking about, is that when Missy was driving in town the other day, she saw a truck with a bumper sticker quoting Hitler on the back, which is just unthinkable in some sense, and also is a measure of that person's disconnection from the world around him, right? Is a measure of that person's disembodiment. And I think the internet feeds into this in unhealthy ways, that someone like that without an embodied community around, like before the internet, would have been a sort of weird case off, at least in my lifetime, a sort of weird case off in the boonies, or whatever you would say. But that now that the internet allows a sort of connection of this ideology, of this damaging and destructive ideology, so that this person is now not alone and also not embodied in the culture around him. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
I think one of the things I've missed is just the conversations around church, that we would have had some opportunity to have on the sidewalk with some of the folks who have attended here, but we had more of those, obviously, with the coffee hours, with everything going on with formation time. There were just a lot of just built-in conversations that gave us a sense of community. And I think you're right, Amber. I think people can become disembodied. You can become more engaged or disengaged as a spectator of cable news or something else that can take you into your silo or wherever you are. But I think those conversations bring about our humanity. We really connect with what is your story going on, and that I think that does feed into what Scott was talking about, the moral development of each of us. One of the things I miss as a priest is a lot of the connections we make with newcomers. Typically been inviting them to coffee or lunch, after maybe their first time to attend Calvary, or in pastoral care counseling, doing that sometimes over a cup of coffee somewhere. And that's so relational, and so it's an easygoing conversation. We haven't had those as much. I've taken the courage to try to invite people to Zoom, even done premarital counseling sessions and different things like that over Zoom, and you're getting used to it and starting to take more initiative there. It's not quite the same, but I think we're trying to navigate that world. I think we're longing for those deeper embodiment connections that you're talking about, Amber, and I think that may change how we see each other.
Yeah.
Well, and it occurs to me, I've gone on and on before about, I think just embedded in the scriptural accounts over and over again are this essential contact with the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was the more that we could organize our lives in ways that kept us from encountering the stranger, I more and more feel like that's keeping us from encountering God and the holy, but also it keeps that part of myself. I'm able to insulate myself more easily into a view like the Hitler bumper sticker.
Yeah.
If I don't have a real flesh and blood person in all their emotional life to alter how I feel about the world, the ideas can get embedded in ways that are deeply damaging and destructive. And by the time they express themselves, they may well look like something like what happened at the Capitol a week ago.
Absolutely.
In an explosion.
Yeah. Of people who weren't from that place coming, like this is like it's all in there too. So anyway, we have run a little bit over our time. We're all about to hustle downstairs to start church up. Thanks both of you for this great conversation. I've really enjoyed both weeks of this, and thanks y'all for comments. We love seeing all the names that come by, thinking of our missed conversations with you too, that will be coming back to us someday. So thanks y'all.
Here. Grateful for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
See you next time.